Hello, hi everyone. Uh, Hello. Yeah, this is much better. Cool. Let me check the live stream of YouTube. Cool. This also works. Streaming on Twitch. Uh, Hello. 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 Yeah. So that is also working just fine. Okay. Let's check the kick one. Hello. Yeah, kick is also working. Sorry. Okay. So here's what we are actually going to do in this live stream. Yesterday we completed these parts. So this is going to be the continuation of what we were doing yesterday, which is covering the Next.js in a crash course format live. And yesterday we covered the installation, routing, styling and font optimization, layouts and pages, links, setting up our DB, which is Postgres DB on the Supabase, and some created our user table as well. So here we are, our user table, and authentication. So we did create login, registration, and things like that, right? So login registration is working fine. So basically we were able to create a user on our table through this particular form, and then we were able to log in. I have deleted that particular user because that was created live. So therefore, just to prevent anything from happening to the database, not to mention I did not also push my code, because I'm not willing to push my code till there is a security in place and there's a limit of the number of users that can be created in that database. So in the end of this live stream, not today, maybe later, the entire thing will be live as well, so that people can actually look. Sorry. So what are we going to do today? Today is we're going to look into what is authorization, right? And when I say that, I mean what it is, not how to do it properly, because I'm going to take a shortcut. I'm just going to show you what it is in principle, in practice, and then how to implement it in a better manner is something that I can do tomorrow's live stream, right? Because I'm thinking of just extending out this particular tutorial into kind of like a project as well. We'll see, but it is in that particular project that the full uh, authorization part will come into picture, where we can have a password and email login, but then that will require access token, refresh token, understanding of why we need both of them, how they are different, things like that. And then a more secure way, in my opinion, is just email magic link. So basically what you do there is you get the email from the user, you check on your DB whether that particular email exists or not. If it does not exist, you create a user on the fly, you give a email, basically a link, you create a token, you then provide a link to that particular email, and for, let's say, invite or something like that, that will be the first time sign up process if the user clicks on it. And otherwise later, if the email exists in your database, you simply provide the verification link with the token in the URL parameters. So when that particular link is actually clicked, the user comes to your verification client page. There you get the token from the URL parameter, you verify it, and you provide a access token for that particular user through that. So it's kind of like more secure in a way rather than providing the email and password scenario, password login scenario. So this is much more secure. Me just drinking my coffee late at night. Okay, so that's the part of tomorrow's video. Today I'm just going to show you how to do the authorization part so that we can move forward with data fetching, which will be just fetching the profile information. Rendering, I'll show you how you will be able to see the difference between static and dynamic immediately the moment we do the data fetching of the user from that in the dashboard. Streaming data, I'll show you that as well using that same data fetching example. Error handling, we'll see. I mean, yes, it's kind of like easy. A11Y, yes, this is something that is inbuilt in Next.js using the ESLint A11Y thing, but it's a broader topic, so that is something that maybe we can look later, but I'll just show you how you can actually check if there's some sort of like a accessibility issue, a digital accessibility A11Y issue in your Next.js app. And then finally, we will look into a little bit about the metadata, and we will conclude this crash course. I'll also be giving you the direction as to where you can go from here, and otherwise you can follow me tomorrow as well, where we will be doing the full authorization, and we'll turn this into some sort of like a to-do project. To-do project because it's very simple, but then I'll show you how to actually scale it to the production level, right? Because just because it's a to-do project, it does not mean that you cannot apply the same principles that is applied in the production thing, where you need to scale the entire front the project, right? Where you can serve, I don't know, maybe thousands, 10,000 users, things like that. Okay. All right. So let's begin with the authorization part. It's the same thing. Also, you will be having a written tutorial in the end when this actually goes into GitHub. Cool. So we completed this this entire thing, the sign up and things like that. What I'm going to do is just to mimic how the entire process actually works, right? The authorization process actually works. So I'll show you what the theory is, and then we'll mimic it. We won't be doing it the proper way. So let's assume there's also, since we are using Supabase, so there's also already a Supabase JWT secret. Not going into that because I want to focus on implementing things from scratch in this particular tutorial video. Otherwise, you can look into the Supabase auth, maybe separate video. I'll just do it later. Okay. So let's assume there's a JWT secret, right? And that secret can be my secret. For this purpose, this should be enough, right? So what actually happens is, so let's go back here, show you what we actually have to do. So let's assume there's a user, right? This is our, wait a minute. Okay. So this is our user, right? Is it still good? Hello? Yeah. So this is our, this. So this is our user, right? Now what this user will do is he will visit our site, and then he will have home route, right? And then he will want to visit another route, which is, let's say, dashboard, which is protected. Dashboard will be his user information. Home will be something which is just public, right? So this is something that can be visited by anybody, whether logged in or not, because we need kind of like a marketing page because we need the users. Okay. So this page, when he comes to this particular page, home page, this is served immediately. Okay. So let's say this is kind of like green, right? Public. So served immediately without authorization, right? The reason why there's no authorization part here is because it's public. So it's out of the box. It's clear that everybody can actually have read access to this. So authorization, everybody is authorized to be able to see this page, but then the user can actually will want to visit its own dashboard, and that is public. So the reason why it is protected is because it requires some sort of like a user information, right? So it requires some sort of a user or current user's information, right? To show the current user their own, right, dashboard and not anybody's dashboard. So for that, we have a login system in place. So for this, they need to have, oh boy, yeah, there has to be basically a login, right? You need to log in. This is a decision. So you need to log in. Once you log in, what happens is user supplies some sort of like a email or password or some sort of like mechanism, pass keys or things like that. And this then goes to our server, right? So let's assume this is our server. And server does a bunch of things. First, it validates the email and password, right? Then it does some sort of like a sanitization. So let's say sanitizes email and password, right? Then it hashes the password. Then it verifies the password. So verifies the password, right? And if verification success happens, so if success, then what it does is creates a access token and refresh token and sets those and set them in the cookie, right? In HTTP only format. Okay. Also secure, right? Also some sort of like a domain. You need to provide some sort of like a domain if that is the case. Okay, so let me just make this thing a little bit big. So this is happening in our backend, right? And then it responds, right? So what you then do is basically this is now a response to this. Response with cookie. The difference between access token and refresh token is twofolds. One is 15 minutes, let's say. This is less than the refresh token. So let's say 7 days. And second is the refresh token, even though it sends, it is assigned in the cookie of the browser and it is sent in every request. It is not actually utilized in every request. It is only utilized in one specific route, which is only hit by the front end when the access token is expired, right? So this is something that we'll look tomorrow. We don't have to worry about it. Just understand what's the principle here. And then this particular response with cookie is accepted by the browser, which is, let's say, client, right? In our case, this is browser. Like this. Okay. And then the user, basically this is the user, right? Client user. And then whatever the user, and then this using this particular cookie, once it's here, we verify the entire user in the front end. Verification success happens, right? So we redirect this particular user to our protected route of dashboard, right? And in this dashboard, based on this, then we actually retrieve a bunch of data, right, for this particular specific users. So now we can have another hits, say in some sort of like an API point of users, right? And this request will actually sends a cookie, which is access token and refresh token, both to backend every time, right? So this is actually going to backend every time, right? And backend actually again verifies these access token. It checks whether this access token even exists or not. Otherwise, it does not provide the data to the dashboard, right? If the access token exists and it is not expired, it provides the data to the dashboard. So that's the entire process, right? What I am going to do in this particular tutorial to mimic it in a very crude manner is quite simple. Am I still audible perfectly? Cool. So what I'm going to do in this particular, hopefully there's no lag, is that rather than doing all that shenanigans of generating the access token, refresh tokens, and things like that, we'll just simply set this JWT secret for now in our cookie, and we will utilize this particular secret in principle to just mimic what actually happens in principle with proper mechanism, right? And tomorrow we can see how to actually implement the entire thing. So we will go back to our auth in our sign up, and in our actions, we see that here we are able to insert the users here, right? So now, since we have inserted the users, what we can do is okay. Wait a minute. Let me just have my coffee. Okay. So at this point, we have the user, right? And what we are going to do is let's release this thing. No issue there. But after the release, let's also set a cookie, right? So what I'm going to do now is set the cookie. Set dummy cookie for mimicking actual mechanism, right? So we will have a const of cookie settings, right? And this will actually have a key of secure, which will check whether we have the env of development. If it is true, right, then it should be false. So what we'll do is we will make it as production. So anytime when we will be building or when we run npm build or npm run build or things like that, this will become true. Otherwise it will remain false. Okay, so secure is false in localhost because we are doing HTTP rather than HTTPS. So that's one. Then the same site, right? So the same site settings will be strict. Okay. Then we have path. Path will be just this slash. Then we have HTTP only, right? And this will be true. Okay. Because we don't want this particular cookie to be read by the JavaScript in the browser. Otherwise, it's susceptible to attacks. Even this is susceptible to attacks like CSRF if I'm correct, but this, if it is done through HTTPS SSL routes, properly set up SSL, then it's very secure in a way. It's kind of like secure. Otherwise, any attacker can actually go do whatever you want, whatever they want actually, in if they actually put their mind there. Then we have the max age, right? And see, the thing is, this particular cookie is, let's say, access cookie settings, right? And for this, we will have the max age of, let's at the very top, I'll have two max age. One is max age 15 minutes, right? And this will be just 15 minutes. So 60 seconds, This is 60 seconds followed by 15, right? And then we have max age of 7 days. So let's say max age 7 days. This will be 60 seconds into 60. So that's 1 hour followed by 24. That's 1 day followed by 7. That's 7 days, right? So we will use that particular constants here, which is this. So access token is, let's say, for just 15 minutes. And right, so that's 15 minute. Then we have domain. Now, see, this domain is not required if you're just building things in Next.js. Backend, frontend, everything is Next.js. This is not required. What happens is that in most of the scenarios, you have the front end and then you have the backend. So, and they are actually hosted on different domains. So let's say the backend can be backend.domain.com and your front end can be just domain.com, right? So there's that. So then if you do not provide the actual domain, it can be a problem. Not to mention you should be providing the domain so that the request or the cookie is only set up for that particular domain. Example, just to show you what I mean. So say the domain is, you have two applications. One is front end, one is back end, right? Let's go back here. Okay, so let's say there's a front end, right? And this is in mydomain.com. Make sense? Then you have backend, right? And this is in backend.mydomain.com. Okay. So this is the browser. This is the backend. So when you actually are setting the so-called cookie, make sure that the domain is only this, not this. If you do not provide the domain explicitly, if you do not provide the domain, then what happens is if the server is in here, then the cookie will be set to this particular domain, which means when the front end will get that particular cookie, if I show you, go to the application, go to the cookies here. Okay, so this domain, right? When the front end will get this particular, or the browser will get this particular domain, and it will find that it is backend.mydomain.com, and it will check, oh, my actual host is just mydomain.com, it will just remove that particular cookie, right? So it will not work. That's the entire point. So we will have the name. So right now what we are doing is we are setting the domain, we are setting the path, we are setting the expiry date, yes, size is automatic. We are saying that yes, HTTP should be true. This we are saying based on the environment, make it true or false. Same site we are saying strict. Partition, cross-site, priority we are not actually touching for now. These are the new settings. Hopefully I will be doing some video later, but it is, if I'm correct, these are the kind of like new settings, some sort of like a third party domain or something like that. So for the domain, okay, so for the domain, what we will do is we will say it's domain, right? So let's also set what the domain will be. Let's call it domain. Since it's going to be kind of like a constant, let's call it this way only. And what we are going to do is we are going to say if the production environment, if the environment is production, right? This way, then call a function which will be get base domain. We'll see what this function will do. And here you will simply pass a process.env and app URL, right? So app URL will be coming from here. So let's also say app URL, right? And this will be your HTTP localhost 3000. And when you're going to do the Vercel deployment, this will be whatever the Vercel host was. So I think it was next something. Yeah. So it will be this, right? It will become in production this. So we will set it up without this thing. Okay. So we'll set it up later when we are going to deploy it. But this is how the app URL is. Now imagine if it's a backend, different backend. So the app URL is basically front-end app URL. So let's be more specific here. Whatever the front-end domain is, it's that. So we'll copy this. We'll go here. We'll just make this as this. Now the reason why I don't need next public is because this action is on server. So it does not require this particular thing to be public facing or client thing. And if this is not the case, then the domain can be simply undefined, by the way. And if it is undefined, what happens? The default behavior is it will set whatever the wherever the particular server which is setting this cookie is running. So if domain is backend.mydomain.com, it will become backend.mydomain.com. The reason we are saying undefined if it is not production is, for the most part, domain always becomes localhost. Okay. So because it does not matter if you're running on 3000 port or if you're running on 4000 or something port, localhost is localhost. Okay. So that's what this is all about. What is this? Let's go. Well, first let's use this particular domain here and then we'll do that. Okay. So this is our domain. Now here inside the src, we will have a folder called lib. And here we will have something called helper.ts. Okay. So this is going to be our folder lib helper. And here we will have that particular function, which will take that particular domain, and that domain is not just domain, it's going to be subdomain, because like I said, backend.mydomain.com, frontend.mydomain.com or mydomain.com. So it should be subdomain, right? So it should be string. Okay. And since it's a string, what we have to do here, let's call this and make this as this, right? So either it will be available or it will be null, empty string. So we will have a check here, which will be if subdomain equal empty string, right? We are going to simply return undefined. Make sense? It will be the same. Otherwise, we are going to call a function called match, and this will be subdomain dot match, and this will be regex, like so. And for this, we will have within this, I'm just going to copy a few things. Wait a minute. Yeah. So this is something that I took from one of my projects. So we are actually supplying whatever is the subdomain part, right? We are trying to actually extract this thing out plus dot a to z plus. Okay. Let's check what this actually does, and we can actually do it through ChatGPT. So you can actually always go and check the regex. Basically, I picked it up from somewhere, right? When I was trying to do this particular thing. So you can see that it will actually validate examples like this. Okay. It will invalidate the examples like this. So basically it's kind of like a domain validation. And then what we are going to do is we are going to say if return if match exists, right? If it is validated properly, then simply return the match of 0. Otherwise, make it undefined. Hope this is like kind of like clear. If this is not exactly clear, let's just copy this, paste it here, and say explain. So the provided function is written in TypeScript. It extracts the base domain from the given subdomain. That's it. That's all it does, right? So if I'm providing the subdomain, it will give me dot whatever the name is, right? See, use case. If I supply this, it will give me dot example.com. If it is this, it will give me dot site.org. If it is this, it will give me dot example.com. Invalid domain, it will be undefined. If it is empty, it will be undefined. Prepending this, right? So this is actually required based on some sort of like a cookie setting. So I'm just doing it right here. Hope there's no lag. Okay. No lag, right? Good. Okay. So now that that is clear, right? We will get our domain. And this will be our domain here. What we can do here is we can have it above like this so that it runs every time. So this is my access cookie settings. Right? And let's copy this entire thing and make it as refresh settings, cookie settings. The only thing that will change is this will now become 7 days. Hope that makes sense. Now in Next.js, now depending on what technology you're using, whether it's Nest, Express, things like that, each have their own way of setting the cookie. In Next.js, you can do it very easily. What you can actually do is you can import something called cookie store. Let's call it await cookies from next headers, which is right here. Okay. Once you have that, you can say cookie store dot set, and here you will have the cookie name. So in the lib itself, right, outside of the lib and app, let's also have a new folder called constants. Constant, yeah. And here let's have route.ts. This will contain all our constant regarding routes. We'll do it later. And here it will be cookie.ts, right? So what is the name of what we actually want to do is, let's say export access cookie key, right? And this will be access token. Similarly, I'm not even able to speak. So it's refresh token. Okay. Now here it will be access cookie key, and then we will supply the value. So the value will be for the value we were using this, right? So let's just get the value, mimicked value. Okay, and we will supply the mimicked value here, and then we will pass access cookie settings like so. So that's one. And then we will have the same thing, except this will be refresh cookie settings like so. And this will be refresh cookie key. Now, caveat, just a warning. This is not what you actually do. This is not how you actually set up the JWT. You utilize something called JSON Web Tokens. You create a new token from it. You then set it up. It's just that in principle, this is what you actually do, right? Everything else is fine. There's no issue there. Everything else is exactly fine. The only problem is this mimicked value. In reality, this mimicked value is not like this. What you have is an object, let's say, which will contain a bunch of user information, not his personal info like email, password, not those. It's just something that can actually help you verify that it's that particular user, let's say. So it can be ID, it can be AWS Cognito ID, it can be Auth 0 ID, something like that, which is not your database ID either, because let's maintain some sort of like security. And then you have your JWT secret, which we are using right here. And this is actually created using something called, wait a minute, this is created by something called OpenSSL, some sort of like jargon or hex, right? Or NPX. I think it was NPM next, some sort of like a secret. There is a way to create a hash secret. You use that. You don't use strings. And then you use that particular JWT secret to sign off a new token using that JSON Web Token NPM package. All of that we will look tomorrow, but assume that for now this is enough, right? Okay, now we have set these things up, right? What we can do is in the lib itself, we can also have sessions, right? Let's do it a little bit of like decoupling manner, right? And here we will say this is server only, and this package import server only. This server only is now inbuilt in Next.js, so you can utilize it so that this particular code only runs on the server end. Hope that is making sense. And then here we will have a const of create session, which will be taking, for us it is nothing, but eventually it will take some sort of like a data. And here we will make sure that this is async, right? And whatever we did here, right, all of this whole thing, we can cut it, we can go here, we can paste it, and we can just get these things. So at the top we can have these two as well, like so. We can have cookies, this and this. So the way I am doing this is I come to this end of this particular thing, I press CTRL control and space, and this is just going to do the trick. So we are getting this particular domain, we are doing the settings, and then we are setting this up, right? Okay, and because we are doing all these things, just make sure that this part is at the top, let's say, not here. Okay, this much is fine. Let's make sure that this particular part is inside the try catch, just for the sake of proper, I mean, there will be no error in this small case, but just to be sure. Okay, and we can have console.log, I mean error, and we can have error. So a to do here will be later down the line, once we do the fourth stream or something like that, when I'm converting this into full-fledged project, it can be a Winston loggers thing, right? So hope this is making sense. We are just saying create a session. And here we can just remove all those imports. And in the sign up action after this release, we can simply have await create session. And that's it. Okay. So this should do the create session part. And similarly, let's also mimic the same in our sign in action right here, right? Login success. And here we go. So you can see that here it's a different thing, right? Login success, things like that. Let's also just copy this. Sign up action. Here we go. Let's say registration success. And here we can say login success. Okay, so we can see that here the access token will have like it. I'm just creating it using this with inbuilt data, but technically we actually pass certain data from to this, right? So to make this particular thing dynamic, because during the registration it can be another, like the way we are going to pass bunch of data, it will be here, and during the login we will actually access the data again and we will pass it here. So from that we will create this mixed value. Hope that is making sense. Okay, cool. Once this is done, now what will happen is if I log in, let me check once more. Okay, so if I now log in, you will see that there will be a user that is created, right? But you will also see something here as well. So let's, if everything is like fine, then that will happen. So let's do that. So I'll start with code dusting.email. Then I will have a password, which will be the same password that we had yesterday. So for that, I'm just going to go to this form, copy this, go here, now sign up. Now that I have signed up, you saw that in the cookie itself, there's an access token with the value, refresh token with the value. And the domain, you can see it's localhost. Path is what we set up. It expires at two different timelines. So this expires just in 15 minutes. So it's 4th of January 2025. So it is going to expire at around 1870 something, right? And this is like 11 or something. So basically there is a UTC, some sort of like issue there. But I mean, in terms of server, it will work. But this is like going to expire around 11th, 7 days from now. The size is automatic. HTTP only is set, which means that I cannot access this through JavaScript on the browser. What do I mean by that? So let's do this thing. Let's go to the session itself. Here I'm creating this thing, right? Let's create another one. Let's call it document cookie. We'll have the same value, mimic value, or let's just give it value, doc value. And here I will have custom things. Let's call it same site, which is true, which is strict. It's the same thing. Let's just copy the whole thing here like so. The only thing that we will change is this. We'll call it false. And let's say it's string. Something is wrong. Okay, let's let it be this. So our only concern is this HTTP only is false. Now if I go back, let's clear this. Go to home, login. If I check here, refresh, we already have this, right? So let's just log in this time. Here, I will log in using the form password, which is this. Sign up. Yeah, let's save it. So now we have the doc value, right? And this is my secret and things like that. So if I go to console and I just zoom it out, here I can have something called document.cookie. See, I can access the document underscore cookie value, but I cannot access that HTTP only cookie value. And this is how you actually protect your tokens. So that's the difference between HTTP only and not HTTP only, right? As a matter of fact, you can actually utilize this particular document cookie to actually set things up, if I'm correct. So cookie dot say name hello, right? Now if I go to my application, oh okay, wait, so it will be document.cookie equals, so whatever the previous document.cookie was, we have to actually make sure that that is also there. So like this, and here it will be semicolon, if I'm correct, name value. Now if I go to here, okay, I think I'm forgetting something, but you can actually set the cookie from here. So let's just check document.cookie set cookie. It's been a long time since I've done this. Yeah, I think it's the same, but for some reason. Yeah, I don't know why it didn't work. Let me just check what I did wrong. Okay, this was wrong. This should have been fine. Maybe, yeah, now it is here, username. Okay, so you can see that I can actually set it up, right? And then I can actually, okay, this actually worked, by the way. So it became session. If I just refresh it, it is here. But if I just copy this, close it, open a new tab, paste it here, go to this part, inspect it, go to my application. So right here, it is still there, right? And if I now do the document cookie, again, I can access everything which is not HTTPS. That's the entire gist here. So if you check here, you'll find that these two are HTTPS and they are not accessible. So that's what we were aiming. Okay, cool. Hopefully that makes sense. Now if I go back home, go to login, sign in, sorry, I'm back to this particular page, right? With this thing, right? I can remove this. And here in the session, I can just delete this, not required anymore. Okay, so this in principle is authorization setup, which is that we're creating a session. Now, how to actually utilize it, right? Because if even right now, wait a minute, hello, yeah, even right now, if I just log out, I will be still able to access the dashboard, right? So let's see how the logout actually works. And then we will check whether the authorization is working fine or not. In our sessions.ts, right, we will create another function which says delete sessions, which will be delete session. It will be again async, and it will again have cookie store, which will await the cookies. Okay. And this will simply do this thing. So it will say cookie store dot delete. In Next.js, this is how it works. Dot delete, and you provide the name, you provide access, cookie key, and then you provide the domain, which is going to be whatever the domain was. So in our case, it will be this right here. So let's also have this. And it will be domain, right? And the same will be refresh cookie key. And that's it. This is just going to erase our session and we are logged out. If the verification is in place and the middleware is in place, we will be able to log out just fine. So let's see whether this actually works or not. So in our dashboard page, where we have this link, right? Rather than saying this to be a dashboard, what we can actually say is either we can make it a button and we can just simply call that particular action, or it can be a route, right? Because we can have it as a link and it can be a route.ts file, which just calls that delete session. So these two are the only possibilities in our case. So we can do for now a button scenario, right? This can actually be removed and we have to copy this, cut it from here. We'll have a button.tsx. And remember that this button is not going to be accessible because in app router, as we mentioned yesterday, there are specific named convention files, which becomes route paste.tsx. Okay, so now here we will have use client. So this can be a component co-location. Okay, or if you want better, you can have like a UI folder, and within that you can have a bunch of things, your choice. For this, I am not going to do that. Now this will be a button which will be returning that button, not this, like so. Okay, and the way to actually extend this so that whatever like you can actually provide the props of button to this button is you can have something called interface, or you can have something called type, right? So let's say type, it can be button props, and this will be component props with ref, and let's make it as button and like so. No, this, right? And here you can have like so. This will take children and whatever the rest is. And this will now be children. And here you can also spread it out as rest. Also extract out the class name. And here you can make it as like so. In the end, you can have class name. By the way, this is not how you do it. You utilize something called CLSX or CN. So CLSX and Tailwind merge to create a util file, which is CN utility, and then you do it. Tomorrow we will do that as well. When we will install the chat CN and things like that, maybe we will do that as well. It will do it automatically. Now this button is now a client component. So in the dashboard page, we will simply say button. Here we will say logout. Now because it's a client component, we can have on click on it, right? And this on click will be available here. Thing is, do you want the on click here? If I'm correct, it will give me the error if I have the on click here, but let's see. So it will be like this, and I can have a use server inside, and I can have hello, right? This will give an error, but if I remove this, I'll have to check whether this gives an error or not. Yes, so that gives an error. If I remove this, again, it will give me an error. right? So I cannot do this like this. So what I can do is I can pass a prop called action, and I can say, okay, just make it logout. Make sense? And in the button, I can have here, I can have in the and a prop called action. It will be, let's say, logout for now. And here I can have action. Okay. And here we can have the logout. Now here we can have on click, and this can actually check whether the action equal logout. If that is the case, right, then we are going to do that thing, delete session. So because we have utilized that import server only, this will also fail, but let's check what happens, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to say delete session, and we are going to just simply call it. And yes, this is not going to work. Okay. What is happening? Yeah. Okay. So how should we actually go about doing things that makes it possible for us to be server end and still call it, right? So one route is that API route thing, or the next is what I'm about to show you. Okay. So one way is if I just simply remove this part, right? And okay. This should work. One is in the button. First, I should first make it like this and make this as await at least, right? And the server script thing, I need to simply remove this part. ECMA script file has an error. Okay. This is weird. This actually works. Let me just check. So let's call it use server instead. Yep, now it will work. The thing is that we need to have import this. It depends on what security level you need. If I am saying that this is a server, yeah, I mean, this will work, but it depends on whether this is secure or not. Maybe I can look into it tomorrow, but at least for now it will work. What it will do is if I click on logout, this will be removed and this is gone, right? So technically it's logged out. The reason why we are still here is because we have not set up the verification and middleware for us. So let's do that. So now we are going to look into the protection part of it, right? We have a public routes, then we should also have a protected route. So for that, in the src folder, or if you don't have src, then in the root folder, we'll create a file called middleware.ts. Okay. All right. And in our constant, we have the routes, right? Route.ts. Here, let's export the routes. So let's have a home page, which will be this. And we will, so basically what I try to do is I create the constant for all the routes and utilize those variables or those constant throughout my links and buttons and things like that, so that if I have to change it later in terms of folder structure, I can just change it in one place and every other place it actually changes. So that's what I'm doing. So now it will be dashboard, and that will be dashboard. We also have login, that is basically auth login, or if I'm correct, auth sign in. Let's check. Yep. And then we also have auth sign up, which is our register. Okay. So these are our routes in which these three are public. This is protected. So in our middleware, let's import these things first. So what we are going to do in this is we are going to create two arrays. Sorry. So one is going to be protected routes, and this array will simply contain dashboard. That's it. And then one will be basically, let's say, public routes, and it can contain that login, register, and homepage. Now you don't need both of them. One will be enough, but I'm just showing you what is public, what is protected for our small application. And then we will have export of default async function middleware. This name is important. It has to be, let's say, middleware. It will have request of next request, and then here it will be returning something. Okay. So now what we are going to do now is we are going to say is protected, right? Is protected route. We are going to check whether that is the case or not. And the way we will check is protected routes dot includes whatever the current path is. What is the current path? So the current path will be, current path is request dot next URL dot current path name, not password, path name. Okay, so that's our current path. So it will be either slash dashboard slash auth sign in slash auth slash sign up, things like that. And if it is a protected route, right? If it is a protected route, first we are going to check whether this is the case or not. Then we will also have cookie store again, and we will say cookies. And from here, we will have our access token. I'm not going to go deep into how the refresh works here. I'm just going to focus on the access token for now. Okay. And if the access token is present, so we are going to say cookie store dot get access token key, right? If you get this with the proper value, so we are going to extract this out, and then we are going to say is logged in. Now is logged in is a variable in which you can actually have a bunch of you can say logic, but in our small application it's simply saying if access token exists, right, then I am logged in. That's it. And then if I am visiting a protected route and I am not logged in, then simply return with next response with redirect and have a new URL, right? This URL is a JavaScript function, not the Next.js. And here you simply supply me the login page, right? After that, you can have this as next URL. You have to pass that, by the way. And this will be inside this, if I'm correct, like so. Okay. That's it. Therefore, now if everything else works, I mean, it's not a protected route. All I want is return the next response with next. So that's my middleware. We don't need it. Let's remove that. And here we will have our export const config, which will be an object which will have a matcher like so. This will be array. And for this, we can actually just go to Next.js like so. We can remove this, remove this, remove this. Let it be. So in the docs, we can have middleware. Here's a matcher. Let's just copy this part. You can read it like here. So what this does is matches all request paths except for the ones starting with API routes, next static, next image, and favicon, sitemaps, things like that. Okay, so that should be it. So this is our middleware. Now, if I go back here and just go here, finally, if I am here, right? So you can see that I don't have anything here. So now if I just refresh, I am redirected, right? So that's my authorization. If I am not logged in, I will not be able to access that. So if I just click sign in, I am here. If I say log out, it's right here. Now, if I have to refresh, it's here. So what we can do is, for the logout purpose, in the it's where it is here in the button. So we can also have some sort of a refresh. Now, if I'm correct, what we can do is, for the better security, let's just try that out, because I'm pretty sure I was able to utilize that part. So in our lib, in our session, we will have this only. We'll remove this, right? And then in our actions, we will have export logout, which will be async. Right? And this will be simply calling the delete session from this. And then it will be basically saying revalidate the path. Not this. After this, it will just redirect me to login. Yeah, right. So this is my logout function action, and in the dashboard itself, here, what I can do is have a form. Here I can have logout action, and then can just have a button with a logout, right? And this button will have this class name. So let's have this class name. And this is my basic small form with the logout. So let's go back here. Let's sign in. There will be a style issue. Okay, there's no style issue either. Cool. So it depends like on your application. So now if I click on logout, I am back here, right? And that's what I want. Now, if I go to register, I'm able to do that. If I go to home page, I'm able to do that. But if I go to dashboard, I'm back to sign in. So that's my authorization. Hope that makes sense. This is in principle. Of course, you don't have to do please never do this thing which I did here, which is just a small mimicking value. We will check tomorrow how to actually do the entire thing. Maybe tomorrow, maybe on Monday, depends. And this is my delete session, right? Okay, we need one more thing in this session, and that is the data access layer. Because we are creating session creation, we are having a logout, but we also need a way to verify whether we are actually like the person who is accessing. Basically, it needs to be a verification of the session, right? Before we hit any of our backend API, we need to actually, or SQL, we need to have a verification whether we are allowed to make that particular request or not. Okay, so for that, we will have something called verify session. It will be async, and this will be basically again taking that cookie store, right? Cookies like so, and from there it will again take the access token, which will be cookie store dot get access token value. Okay, and then it will check whether I am logged in, which will be just access token, and all I need it is to return the is login. That's it. For us, it can be this, or it can be this as well. So what happens sometimes is, because we are on Next.js, so it will not happen. Otherwise, if there's a Next.js front end, Next.js app router front end, and then there's a Next.js backend or Express backend, you require that access token to be available in cookie, or I mean in header, technically speaking. So you need that in header in terms of access authorization token, or in terms of that cookie. Otherwise the request actually fails. So that's what it is, right? So that's why we are also sending back the access token. Cool. So this is our verification verify session. We will utilize it every time. And the way we can actually do it in the middleware itself. So what we can do is, rather than doing the entire thing like so, we can just say verify session, right? And we can just check whether this is logged in or not. So this is the verification. If it is not logged in, we can have this. So it's kind of like a data access layer, DAL, data access layer. So before we do any sort of access to our data of protected routes, we do this. Or if we are trying to hit any protected API routes, we also do this. Okay. So that's a very basic verify session. So now we can also remove this thing, the client one, we don't need it. All right. This takes care of our authorization. So let's go with the data fetching. And for that, what I'm going to do is only fetch this part. Cool. Hopefully there's no lag. Hello. Okay. So now let's log in. We are in the dashboard. Fair enough. Now here I'll be just fetching the data. In the dashboard, in the page, right, we have the logout button. That's fine. We have the go home button, but here let's have another section, and let's say this is my8, top, bottom, some space, and this will be our data. And for that, we will have a user name, then we will have user email. I'll show you why I'm doing this, because it's related to streaming. And then we will have, that's it. These two are enough. Okay. Now let's have another component called username.tsx. This will be const export default function username. This will be a div which will be username, and same we will going to do user email. So these are my 2 data points, right? Now you might be thinking why I'm doing this. To be honest, in real world you don't have to do this. This is just to show you what actually the streaming is. Okay, this is email div user email. Okay, now let's call this. So now we have the username and we have the user email. Okay, so here let's also have this. Okay, so assume that one of them, we are going to actually add streaming part first, and then I'll show you how to actually fetch the data. Or maybe we can fetch the data first and then I'll show you how the streaming actually works. Okay, because we are doing this, let's also have the async here, right? Because in server component, we can fetch the data directly. So that's what we are going to do. We're going to use direct here. But to make sure that that is the case, we can have something like username, like so, and fetch user name. This is our component or some sort of like a data function. So let's now say here const fetch username async. Make sense? Now here I am going to say await verify session. Like I mentioned, anytime we are doing any sort of like data fetching, which is protected data fetching, or it's a API route which is protected, we are going to first verify whether the person is logged in or not. Make sense? Okay. If the person is not logged in, right, we are going to throw the error of unauthorized. Make sense? Cool. If that is not the case, also just to make you understand, this thing which I am doing on the server component, this is basically, it can be a fetch request, then it can be an API route, and there you have to do this. Okay. And if you are not fetching the data from your end, but there's a separate backend, then you supply the access token there, right? And that particular backend actually verifies and do the things. So it's that person's problem, but make sure that there's some sort of like a access level data layer access scenario. If you're just building on Next.js, that's what we are doing. So it's going to throw an error. Make sense? Okay. Now we are going to say, okay, now user equals username equals, if it's username or just name. Yeah, it's just name. Fair enough. So let's call it username only. Now here, I will have a client again, which will be a DB, which will be connect, right? And then this will be a release. No, not this. So it will be await DB connect, like so. Now it will be release, like so. And within that, we will have our like query. So this will be client.sql. If I'm correct, we were doing the client.sql only. Await. Yeah, we were doing this await only. Fair enough. So let's copy this whole thing itself like this. So this is a DB data. We are saying that what we want is name, which is a string from this. And that's what we are going to actually get, the name. And for the email purpose, see, the email purpose is whatever the user is, right? So once we actually log in, we will have that particular user's ID Technically speaking, that's what we actually going to have. And the way we will have that is through that access token. So in the access token, you will have some sort of like a information through the for the users. So what then happens is either you decode it on your front end, because if you're building everything on Next.js, Next.js has that information of that access token because it's the Next.js which created that access token. So therefore, it can also decode that access token, and that is there. And through that, you can actually extract out that email or some sort of like data. Also, when you're creating that particular access token through that login, right? Technically, during the login itself, if I go to my actions, right? During the login itself, here, I have the DB data. I have the user's data, right? When I'm creating the session. So to be honest, I can return this data, right? When I'm redirecting it, I can store this data somewhere. So if I'm doing it on the backend, I can store it in, let's say, localhost or somewhere. Or if I am doing it, it's a separate backend, then I can send this data back rather than the redirect, right? I can send this data back to the front end. The front end can store it in some sort of like state management or somewhere, local storage, wherever it requires. And then we can utilize that part, right? So just imagine that part, right? For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to be getting this particular email. What I'm going to do now, let's pass this here, which is going to be any for now. We are doing this thing. You can also have user here, which is an email. Yeah, wait a minute. Let me just eat this thing, which I'm. Okay. So we can just pass this user, and here itself, let's go where this was. We can have this for now. Username or user email, right? In the cookie itself, let's say, not following the best practices, but let's go there because so this is one of the things. So technically speaking, when I'm doing the server component thing, there's a backend which is different, and from there I get the return response which I capture on the front end, and then I store it, let's say, in some sort of like local storage if I am not doing state management that much, or if it's some sort of like a Justant or something, then I store there. Thing is, in the server component or app router architecture, I tend to use the local storage more, right? But I cannot have the local storage access in the server end. This is a server thing. Okay. So I cannot actually have the access here. So that's why I will just store the email in the cookie itself. Okay. And that will be my user dot email. And just make it any. Quick fix. Let's call it any. Okay, is something wrong here or what? So in the actions, we are doing row of 1. This is my sign in action. We should also have, okay. So in the sign in action, we should also have the name. So it will be name string email string email password. Okay, so we will have that. Let's make this as so. Not that we will have the password, but yeah. And this will be my user email. And the cookie settings, let's call it the whatever the refresh is. And this should actually set that username here. And here in the create session itself, I am inserting the user. Let's also call it name, email, and password. Not that it is required. The password part is not required. So I'll just remove this password part. I'll also remove the, here I'll do it like this, user.name, and in the email you do user.email. Here you can remove this part. And then here I'll just make this as name, which is going to be name as well. Let's have username. Let's have email. Maybe this can be this, and this can be this, and this can be this. Here we go. Okay, so now if I just log in, I will have these as well. Therefore here I will have email as well, but maybe I don't require, let's have here, let's have this only. And in the verify session, since I'm getting this, let's also have the email part, which we will get from the user email like so. And let's also have and if the email is not there, then it's not logged in. So we will also be sending back, for our particular case, let's also send back the email. Now, all of this access is possible if we remain on the server end. For the client end, we can later look into it if it is required. So technically I utilize a local storage for it, or you can utilize session storage for it, or you can have that React query or some sort of like just start or something like that. We can look it into later. For this purpose, this should be enough that I am sending this thing so that I can have the name from this, right? And that name should be available for me in that fetch user, right? So now I can just simply return the username, and that will be my username. So username is basically username. It will fail for sure. Let's just clear this out. Come to this page, log in, and now I have the code dusting, which is coming from here, right? Now you might think why we need the refetch when we can actually fetch it true, but like I said, this is not the real world mimicking, it's the real world example of how you are now going to fetch the data, right? So to fetch the data, make sure that you have some sort of like a data access layer, which is going to send you this is login. You throw the some error if it is not the case, and then you fetch the data using something. For the most part, that fetch the data will be done using the access token itself, not through this or some sort of like an ID, not through this, right? You don't technically require an email like this, to be honest. Okay. That current user is that ID of the current user is encoded in the access token itself. So when the request is hit, you decode you basically decode the access token. Through that you get the ID or the email, whatever you have stored there, right? And then through that you actually do this. For the sake of the simplicity, I did this. Okay, so don't worry about it. Just to make you understand better, so let's say this is my JWT IO. You can see this is my decoded. This is my payload data. Now, let's say I have a name here, right? Maybe I can have an email which says johndoe@gmail.com. And I can also have, by the way, this sub is the ID. So when I'm creating that access token, I'm making sure that I am having some sort of like a verification for that. So when I am now going to hit my dashboard, right? So here, when I'm hitting this dashboard, right? And this is hit, right? Here I check this thing, but then I also retrieve the access token here, right? And then I decodify the access token. So basically I decode the access token. Okay. Then I use the decoded value of ID email. So we are getting the email from this workaround for this particular thing. Tomorrow we will look into it. But now we will get the email through this after decoding, and then we will utilize that. Hope that makes sense, right? So it's not some like you don't do this. You don't do what I'm doing right here. So the only thing that you pass here is access token, and you have a access token here, like create a JSON web token through that. Okay, makes sense. Cool. So this is my username, right? Let's also have the same for user email. I'm just copy pasting it. Just going to change this to user email. Hope that makes sense. So I'm just doing this, and here it will be user email. Here it will be user email. And here it will be email. Refresh. Let's see, I'm getting this. Okay, we are here. So you can see that it took a lot of time, right? So this is basically my data, right? Data fetching. Okay. Now, this data fetching can be done like we did using just SQL, or it can be done using API request if the backend is different, or it can be done using API request to our API routes, or it can be whatever you want, right? Just make sure there's a data access layer to check whether you are authorized to make that request or not. And that's about it. So this is how you actually fetch the data, okay, in Next.js 15. Thing is, now, what about this rendering static and dynamic? So for this, I'm going to pause and then I'm going to build this thing, okay? So let's, till this point, let's do this. And let's say completed authorization and data fetching. Okay. Now, if I just build this, check what happens. Is there any lag? Hello. No lag here either, right? Yeah. Hope the same is true here. Okay. So let it build. Okay. So you can see that I'm eating something. So anyways, you can see that our homepage is static. You can see this is the legend, static, and this is dynamic. Server rendered on demand, period rendered as static content. So this is my homepage, static. Not found page, something it creates, static. Sign in page, static. Sign up page, static. But our dashboard now becomes dynamic. Why? Because it's now trying to access a data. As a matter of fact, because in Next.js 15, what the Next.js team did was they said, anytime in any server component, if you have an await, async await, we will assume that you're trying to fetch your data on demand. And we will make that particular route or that particular component or that particular page itself as dynamic. See, server render on demand, that's what they're saying. And because we are doing that the same thing, because depending on the email of the user, it will be different data. So you cannot have pre-rendered here things, right? Or, I mean, you can have it if you actually, I think there's a get a static, something like that, where you generate based on the ID or based on some thing in few scenarios, but I mean, you don't have to. That's the entire point. Cool. So this is the where we are. This is basically static and dynamic rendering, right? So it's done by default. You don't have to worry about it. When you build it, you will be doing it by default. Just make sure you understand that the moment you use async await in any of the server component, it by default will become dynamic. Okay, cool. And yeah, so next thing is that if I might have been using some sort of like a fetch request here, and the same fetch request would be happening in, say, user email, right? And these two are the part of this dashboard. There's a way that Next.js automatically caches that request, right? Depending on if they are different or not. So you can read it there in depth in the Next.js docs. Maybe I'll cover it sometime later when the use case arises. Here we don't have that. Okay. So now the question is, what is streaming? Right? So let's do this dev again. Refresh. You see that it is taking some time because the database is connecting, requesting, releasing, connecting, requesting, releasing. So two things, right? To request. So here's what we can actually do. We can, let's log out first. Let's log in. And here we are. So what we can do is we can have in Next.js a loading page, or you can say a suspense boundary. What it does is while you're fetching the data and that fetch request is, or that fetch operation is slow, right? While you're retrieving a data, let's say in this particular page, this is static, this is static, but these two are dynamic, right? So when you're fetching these two data, this entire page is not actually working, right? So if I go to network tab, make it slow 3G or slow 4G and do the complete cache empty reload. See, so it requires that the entire thing is actually fetched before it is like done loading. We can mimic this using something called in it itself. What I'll do is here I will have a await promise, await new promise, which will be doing a resolve with the set timeout of resolve. Let's say it's going to take 3 seconds. And I'll do the same, but in the user email, let's say it takes approximately 10 seconds. Or let's say 5 seconds. Who cares? Now if I just go back to home, go to the dashboard, see, it's just stuck. Or if I just log out, sign in, again, it's stuck. Or if I just say reload, check this out. This is like just going to keep on running before everything is like here, right? So okay, just keep looking here. This is loading, 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 3 seconds. Now first is available, then 2 seconds more, then this is here. You can see it better if I do this as 10 seconds, right? And do this here. It will be 1, 2, 3. It's loading, 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 loading. It will take approximately 10 seconds before the page is here. Okay, so the way the pages actually render is that your slowest fetch response or fetch request is the fastest that your page can load. So for example, if this takes, some request takes 10 seconds to fetch the data, render it, right? So the entire page is actually stuck for entire 10 seconds. There's no way you can actually do anything about it. So I'm going to show you how to actually can have a better UX experience for the users in that scenario. Let's say this will take 3 seconds. This will take, we are mimicking, that's all, take 10 seconds. So in Next.js, there's a page called loading.tsx. So you can have loading .tsx because we are doing it inside our dashboard. So that's where it is. And this will be the same page, default function dashboard loading. And let's just simply return, in this case, loading. It can be, it can be basically a skeleton loader, something like that. But for now, this should work. Now, if I'm going to refresh it, you will see that this is loading, right? And it will be there till we have our entire 10 seconds exhausted for the second request. And then it is here, right? So that's our loading. The way we can actually see, make a skeleton out of it, it's quite simple. Go to this section, right? Edit it as HTML, copy this entire thing, then go to something called Tailwind skeleton generator here. Go here, try it out, just paste the code, right? Generate, and go to Tailwind CSS playground, copy this thing, paste it here and check. So this is how it will look. In between there's nothing, right? But we need that, right? So what you can do is you can also have here animate pulse, same here, animate pulse, so this is a section. Something is missing. Okay, let's check what we have done and remove this. We can have, okay, makes sense. So this is how it is, right? So this is like skeleton is loading. What we need to do is that this is my like skeleton, but we also need somehow full, right? So you can see this is my entire thing, and then we will have mx auto, and we will also make this as half. So we can just have like this. So here it is, our username and things. If I check the page, this and this and this, right? Maybe we can have this as a little bit higher. Maybe we can have it like this. It depends what you want to do with this. Play with it, have some sort of like a skeleton loader, or and then you can simply, by the way, paste it here if you can, like so. Make sure that the classes are class names, and this should actually work. If I just click here, see, some sort of like a loader is happening. Of course, we haven't designed it yet, but this is how it is. The best thing to actually do is fast loader spinner SVG, right? You do this, animated preloader. So this is what we want. Speed should be extremely fast. Let's go with this. Speed should be fast. Size should be, let's say, big. Color we can have just black, and that should do it, right? So for this, let's copy this, go here, let's paste it like so. And then if I go here, I refresh. Okay, I have to do the CSS as well. So in our global CSS, let's have this as like so. Okay, this is thing, but for some reason it's not working. Can we have like big, yeah, this should work. Let's say this. Right. And can't we have some sort of like a fast preloading thing? Like something which is extremely fast. Let's see. Okay, I need the speed to be fast. Maybe not this, but this for sure. I need this to be, let's say, black. Stroke ways, let's say this much is fine. Radius 12 is fine. Size, this is fine. This is good. Relicense, make it animated. Okay, what about GIF? Anyways, don't want to waste more time here. So you got the you guys might be getting the gist what I'm trying to do here. It's basically saying that there's a loader, right? And let's just make sure that we are back to our loading, right? So there's a loading scenario which is just like this, and what we can do here is make it center, which should be enough, good enough, and make the font as sans and text as say 5 XL. Okay, so this is my loading. So this is happening while we are doing things, and after like about, let's do this, after about 10 seconds this should become that dashboard if everything works fine. Cool. So this is my loading. This is basically a suspense boundary that is created while the fetching is happening on your page level when you have a file called loading.tsx. But in most cases, what you want is, you know that in this particular page, this and this is kind of like static, whereas this is loaded in 3 seconds and this is loaded in, let's say, 10 seconds. So what you want to do is stream the data. You want to make sure that this and this is visible immediately so that user understand what is happening, whereas this and this actually is streamed into this page, right? Hope that makes sense. So now we are going to say look into the streaming data. So for that, what we can have a page level or component level access. So Let the loading be there, because right now this is acting for the user email, which is the slowest. But now we are going to actually wrap this particular username inside the suspense React boundary, which is coming from React, right? And this will have a fallback, which will be, let's say, loading. It will be, yeah, loading username. So that's my fallback. Similarly, I will have a suspense boundary for this user email, and here the fallback. Of course, all these fallback can be skeleton loaders. You can do it what you want. I'm just telling you the principles here. So it will be loading email. Now, if I go back and I refresh, see, my page is visible immediately. Then the username is here after 3 seconds. And then this is coming here in 10 seconds. Okay. Now, if I inspect, right, let me just show you how it actually works. And also make sure that this is flex. This is flex column. This is gap of 4. And this is item of center and justify of center. Make sense? Okay. Now check this out. This is my suspense boundary, right? Make sense? Nothing is actually going to change here. Okay. Here goes. Once more. Reload. I have this inside this. I have this, but if you check, there's nothing here. But now it is also here, right? In the network tab, if I show you, wait for 3 seconds. Here it is. Now after 10 seconds, here it is. See? So that's what this streaming is all about. It's basically saying, look, whatever the page, a simple page, or most of the cases, a page has static content and then there's a dynamic content. The static content should be visible immediately to the users, okay? Whereas the dynamic content depends on the request speed of their respective component level thing. So if I'm requesting a bunch of invoices, or if I'm requesting a bunch of products, that particular part can take different time to fetch the data than if I'm just requesting whether I'm logged in or not on the header. Okay, so we can have all the data fetch component wrapped around the suspense boundary to have a minute control of streaming the data automatically. And this streaming is done automatically. You just have to wrap the things around the suspense boundary, provide a fallback, hopefully not just the text, hopefully provide something like a skeleton loader, which I showed you how to create one, right? Of course, you can tweak it out. No issue there. Need to tweak it out. So let's call it span. Let's also call it like span, but you get the idea, right? So that's what this is, streaming is all about. And Next.js actually makes it extremely easy. Cool. So that takes care of sign in. Here I am loading username. 3 seconds later, my username will be visible. And 10 seconds later, my email will be visible. So that's the streaming in action. Hope this is clear. It's just you have to wrap the data fetch component inside the suspense. That's it. Now let's come to error handling. What is error handling? Well, so the way to actually do that is, remember that we have this thing called if I'm logged in or not in the sessions, right? Here's the verify session. And I'm saying if the email is not present, then I'm not logged in, right? And check what happens if I am in the middleware. If I'm not logged in, then I'm out. Okay. So let's do some sort of like a replication here. What we're going to do is in the user email, let's assume that I'm not logged in. And for that, what I'm going to say is I'm just going to throw the error. Let's say some error happens like so. Let's also go to my username, remove this. Now it's not required. Now this is the runtime error. So that error handling, well, one error handling is basically saying, look, I'm going to throw the error. So this is happening in the runtime itself. Therefore, catch it in the runtime, which is this. And then there's some sort of like errors while you're fetching the data. So that's a runtime thing that can happen. Or there are a bunch of cases where the request cannot happen, things like that. So those are taken care of, right? So all the before runtime error, most of the errors are taken care of. It's just that this sort of like while the things are in production, something happens. So you need a proper UI. I mean, this works, right? See, it works, but you need a proper UI to fall, right? So that's what we are going to do. So in Next.js 15, inside the app, you can have a file called error.tsx. Now, here's the thing. Since the error is coming on the dashboard, right? You can actually have error.tsx inside the dashboard, and this will conform to the layout structure which we discussed in the beginning. So for example, if you go here, in the beginning we had this thing, right? This children is a part of it, also has this, let's say, error. Okay, it's also loading. Cool. So this is the part when I'm saying the error.tsx inside the app router, I'm saying this is a part of this green one, which is global. If there's a layout which exists a part of within the dashboard, you can have the error there. So what will happen is, let's say this part actually renders just fine. The error also, this works just fine. Let's say there's an error in just one component, which is that username, right? So that part will be that particular page will only be throwing that error, not the outside. So if you have, say, headers, you have sidebar, things like that, those will not be affected. It's just that page content will be affected, and it will fall to 404 things like that. But for our use case, let's do it on the global level. And the way the error actually works is that it has to be use client. It has to be the client component because it's going to catch the runtime error. Runtime means it will be running in the browser. So to catch it there, it needs to be a client component. Okay, so let's start with saying use client, and we will have export of default function error, and this will get error and reset it. This is something that Next.js automatically supplies to it. Okay, so we will have error, which will be error and digest, which is a string. And finally, we will have reset, which will be a function of void. Makes sense? Hopefully it does. And then this will be opening. And here we will have use effect. And this use effect will be running whenever the error is here changing. And then we will be console logging our error, right? You can do whatever you want with this error. I'm just console logging this. And then we will have a return, right? And this will be basically entire structure. Let's say this is our error.message, right? And then we will have a button, and this will be try again. I'm not doing the styling for this part, but you understand what I'm trying to see, right? So this is my error. Now if I go back here, This is unauthorized. Whatever we were throwing, it's here unauthorized. Let's say like this, unauthorized, right? It's falling like perfectly fine. And then we can actually try something. Now let's actually trial something here. So what I'll do is I'll say it's flex, it's dvh, make it full. It will be flex column, it will be item center, it will be justify center. So that's one. This can be basically text center. Then the button will be saying class name of say empty4 rounded. If only I can type. Let's call it bg gray 950 px4 py2, right? Basic text of sm, text of white, transition, let's call it color is transitioning, and in hover I'll just say bg gray 800. Hope that makes sense. So here we are, right? This is my entire thing. We can also have this as dvh, so that is like at the center, and we can also make this part as 4xl unauthorized. Make sense? Cool. Also we can have things like say error that cause or something like that, but since we are not supplying that, this should be enough, right? So that is what the error kind of like is. We can have this and refresh. Here we are. Then we can say try again. The try again actually resets this thing, right? Try again, it will be again here. What it does is so if you don't have an error anymore, then if you try again, it will go back to the page where it was. So it assumes that something might have happened once. Therefore, if you try again, it could be the case that that error will not appear again. So that's what this try again is. It's a kind of like a fail safe mechanism. That's it. Okay. Cool. So we completed error handling. There's also something called not found.tsx. Okay. So see, the not found thing is basically it's a page, but there's also it's also a function which actually throws the not found error. Right? So assume that you're coming to this particular, you logged in and there's a file that you want to access. And that file is somewhere here, 1, 2, 3. Let's say file and 1, 2, 3. Right? So this is a not found, by the way. Page could not be found. It's the same thing. It's a default thing. But what we can do is based on this not found page, you can have a custom made not found. So in the app, let's have a page called not found.tsx. It can be default to function not found, and it can return the main. It can have whatever the 404 not found. By the way, this unauthorized thing, it's not this, it's 401. I mean, there's a proper HTTPS codes. Then it can be could not find the requested file, and then here it can be a link which can say go back, not bank, go back, and it will be basically dashboard, right? So this is my so-called stupid small not found page. Now if I come here, see, now that not found is taken precedence. Of course, you will not be doing this thing at the because it's a requested file thing. So what you need to do is you can have it inside the dashboard itself. So it's not a global thing. So now if I just do it here, you will see that it is having some trouble because it requires a file, otherwise it will not work. So now let's say just this, right? Not going to work. So if you make it a global thing, it will work for every not found. Otherwise you need to have some sort of like a callback, like some sort of like a function call. So where is that function call? That function call can be, if I am going inside this dashboard, let's say I have a file. Within that I have a ID. Within that I have a page. Let's assume something like that is the case. And then inside this particular ID, right, outside of this particular ID, right, I will have a file, and this file is basically what I'm saying, it's not found. Make sense? Hopefully it does. So here, and this is where it will be giving me error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say default function file page, and here I'll just return something. But before I do that, I'll just call, say something like is happening here, which is verify session, right? Let's have this async, and it is saying is logged in. Let's say if I'm not logged in, right, then I want to call not found, which is a part of navigation. The thing is, I'm just utilizing this, but basically what happens is, let's not do this then. Let's say I'm saying is file found. Let's call it fetch file, right? And here let's have a fetch file, which is an async, and let's say false. Make sense? And now I'm just going to check whether this file exists or not. If this is false, this becomes true. If this becomes true, it's not found. If this is not found, therefore this should work, right? So this is an ID page where I'm trying to access the file. If the file is not found for some reason, then inside the file page itself, I will have a not found page.tsx, which will be saying the requested file is not there. Now if I access file.124, I will have this. Make sense? Hopefully it does. You can style it. Otherwise this is go back to dashboard. And again, streaming is happening. So that's my, that's basically the error handling and not found. The only two things which is left, and I'll be closing afterwards. This particular crash course is going to be finished. It's just that we can extrapolate it in live stream 3, 4, 5, the entire to-do application step by step. And the authorization in depth step by step. So what is A11I? It's an accessibility things. Okay, so let's go here. Let's go to our homepage and let's inspect. In the tool, you see that there's nothing, right? There's a thing called X-Dev-Tools, which is a web accessibility testing. You can just add it first. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, it's there. It's free. For the most part, it's free. So what you have to do is you reload the page so that extension is loaded. And now it depends like how big the page is. I'll just show you later. You go here, you go to, you actually close it. You do it one more time. Now it's X-Dev-Tools. You go here, close it. Let's say I'm a developer. Accept. Now here, see, all of these are like partial things like that. You need to sign in, but this is basically free. So let's do a full page scan and make this best practice as on. Now it shows you that there are certain issues in terms of accessibility. Okay. It says there should be a document should have a main landmark, something like that. And then it says all page content should be contained within by the landmark. So what is landmark? It's basically saying either have a title within the section or have some sort of like a ARIA label, something like that. So let's fix this. We are not going to fix this part. Let's fix this part. Since we are at a home page, so I'm just going to go to my SRC app page. Here in this section, all I can say is ARIA label, and this can be my home page. Let's say it's a hero section, right? So that's one way of doing this. If I just refresh it, I can do the rerun. Please put this page in whatever state you would like to rerun. Click ready when you're ready to rerun the automatic. Place a current automatic test. Ready. See, that is gone. Or what we can do is we can have ARIA dash described by. Now we have to provide an ID. Let's call it heading, right? And that will be an ID of heading, which is h1. Now refresh, rerun. Okay, so this is ID described by, yeah, ARIA labeled by. Here it is, labeled by heading, not described by. So now if I just rerun again, you're ready, it will be 1, right? So either you can be ARIA label the section or it can be ARIA things. So that's one tool that you can utilize in order to, fix the accessibility part, whatever it shows as accessibility. Again, there's the entire accessibility thing, which is web. Hello. Yeah. So there's a, hi Deepak. So thoughts on Web3. Web3, I'm not doing much. I have worked with Solana before. Solana Pay for most part. I have looked into the that Ethereum thing, Solidity, and also a little bit on that Matic part, which is now a pole, right? Polygon Matic. But I haven't been catching up to it, not looking into it. I am more focused on, let's say, the web, you can say the standard web, coupled with the AI part, not much towards the Web3. So see, if I have to give you some instructions, I will say this: don't go into the crypto end of the things much. So that side is still quite scammy in my opinion. What you should be looking into Web3 is the core technologies like blockchain. Look for that, learn that. Solidity, learn that. Ethereum is fine. Polygon Matic is fine. Whatever the new contract things are coming up, keep up to date with it. I'm not looking into much, but those are there. There's a Alchemy. If I'm correct, those companies should still be existing. Alchemy, Web3. Yeah. Right. So go through it, learn about it, see whether you like how you actually want to do it or not. And that's about it. So see, the thing is, I'm not too keen on learning the Web3 yet. It's been like what? Since 2021, it's been 3 years. I'm going to wait for at least 6 more months before I will start diving again into Web3. So I tell you what, there will be a fusion of Web3 plus AI. That will happen. That's something which was happening in one of the greatest tech conference that was happening last year. That happened, if I'm correct, in Germany or somewhere. It happened in some European country. So there are a lot of new projects that are coming up. It's basically the fusion of Web3 technologies plus AI. The problem is that, well, AI is useful, but the problem with Web3 is you still have scams, the crypto rug pull, right? The latest one is that that girl thing. Something happened with that girl who got famous, created her own coin with a bunch of other people, and again the rug pull happened. Something is happening. So don't go into the crypto part. If you want to understand or build things on Web3, focus on Ethereum, focus on Polygon Matic, focus on Solana, and focus on Bitcoin. So these four are the time tested thing in my opinion at this point. Just focus on those things if possible. Learn Rust for Solana, run Solidity for Ethereum. Polygon Matic is again I think from Solidity only. So learn those if you want, and be on the test network itself, especially if you are in India, because 30% taxation is there. So let's be honest, you cannot gamble with crypto money. Okay. Yeah, that's my opinion. Uninformed or not updated opinion, right? I'm not updated on Web3 since last 2 years, to be honest. But whatever news I'm hearing, this is my opinion. Because if I'm still hearing about Ethereum, Solana, Polygon Matic, and Bitcoin, pretty sure that the people who are building things are building on those platform itself. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. And yes, this site Alchemy, just go for it, look for it, like what they're actually doing, things like that. To be honest, the NFT part, not for money, but NFT can be a very good have a very good application of access, right? Or authorization. Let's put it that way. NFT can be a good authorization thing. The what you can say is you should also be asking yourself, just because a new technology is here, is it even helping solve anything which is not possible to solve in the existing sphere? So that's one question that you should ask while learning any new technology, right? The reason why I am a little bit bullish on AI, even though I don't believe in the hype of it, is that it will plateau this year. It's kind of like done, because it's kind of like a physics problem in my opinion. It's not a computer science problem. It was always a physics, and it was always a physics problem, this AI. In the 1960s, it was not the mathematical issue while they were building the AI. It was a data issue which got solved thanks to internet. But now again, it is the energy issue, and eventually it will be a data issue. So I think they are already reaching the height of the data part, right? The big data and things like that. So in a way, the AI improvement will plateau, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but that will happen. But the application part of the current existing AI models will be huge. So, I mean, it's magical how it can actually figure things out, which is quite hectic, right? You can give it a Word doc. Let's say there's a privacy policy. Let's say your client gave you the privacy policy, or you have somewhere in that Word documentation. You give that particular link to that, you create a PDF from it, you give it to ChatGPT and tell it to create a HTML out of it, and it does that. You don't have to think. Like, these are the fast, small improvements that will help you. So that's my opinion. Just focus on AI tool and getting good at it to incorporate those tools in your daily workflow. Second, if you are looking for Web3, make sure to go for the four up coins, in my opinion: Solana, Polymatic, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. If you are in India and you don't have much money, just focus on the test networks to learn as much as possible, and wait for the government to actually reduce the tax on that, and pull it out from the gray network, because you don't want to deal with the IT department anytime soon. Yeah, that's it. So that's my opinion. Hope it is valuable. So where were we? Oh yeah, A11i. So that's X tool is one tool, right? Second tool is something which Next.js comes with. So in the package JSON, right, you have this thing called lint. So this lint is, if you're going to run it, it has something called ESLint A11Y principles, right? So now if I just stop this, I can simply run pnpm lint or npm run lint, right? And let the ESLint check for the accessibility as well. See, if there is no warning, at least from the ESLint perspective, accessibility guidelines perspective, you are not doing anything wrong. But you should know that if you remove this thing and you remove this thing, you still run it, it will not give you any error, right? Even though that Axe tool gave you the error and you needed this. Thing is, do you actually, so it's kind of like you have to use a bunch of tools. Hopefully that makes sense. And then you also have something called contrast. So if you check this, click on this, which is a inspect element, inspect tool, and you hover over any of the element, you'll find this accessibility pop-up, right? It shows you what is a contrast accessibility. It says 6.5 tick, green tick. So that means it's passing. Name, role, it's link, which means it's good because it's a link, right? Because you are wrapping it around the form, so it becomes a link, even though it's a button. Hopefully that's possible. And it says it's keyboard focusable. So keyboard, so any element which has some sort of like an action attached to it has to be keyboard or tap focusable. That's what it is, right? So for example, if you check here, keyboard focusable is like not available because it's just a heading. You don't tap to it. You don't do anything here, right? But the contrast is amazing, 21, because white background, black thing. So this is there, right? So that's one way, two ways of looking into accessibility. Hopefully that makes sense. The way I will tell you to do it is web.dev learn accessibility. This is a complete guideline or complete course, you can say. The entire thing. I'll paste this course in my live stream as well. Let's paste it here as well. And paste it here as well. I'll also be pasting, I'll be pasting this thing in description as well later down the line. Okay. Okay, so this is something that you guys can go and look into it, sign in, save your progress, do the entire thing. It's valuable resource. I have done it with my another account, but so there are a few things that I do every year. One of them is this, I revise it. Second is make it dark theme. Second is basically there's a Namaste JavaScript series, which I keep on doing it every year. There's also some sort of like a DSA that you might want to do. I think I'm digressing, so let's get back. And yeah, metadata. Let's go with the metadata. Okay. So what is metadata? Metadata is basically all these things, which is meta tags. So if you go to page source, okay, I think I have to run this again. Okay, run it. Dashboard. So it's saying it's like logging me out. Okay, sign in, back, home, dashboard, right? So the reason why it's signing you out is because you have set that 15 minutes access token. So just a little bit digression. So if I go back to this page, I go to my sessions here, and here, let's say this is not this. Let's say it's just 10 seconds. Okay, let's make it 10 seconds. Our access token. Let's access it. Go to my application. Let's log out. Makes sense? This is always going to be there because we are not actually doing much. Not important for this. So let's say I'm signing in. Check this out. This is for 10 seconds. The secret. See what happens after 10 seconds. While the image is being fetched. Right? So this will get out. If I refresh, it's gone. That's why you're getting like log out and redirected. Okay, so the way to actually utilize, and it is at this point you use something like refresh token. You take it, you send API request to some refreshed API point. There it is invalidated. The refresh token is basically stored in your database. There you remove the previous refresh token because you got the new like in that API point you get a request, you remove the previous refresh token, you create a new refresh token, you save that in that particular database, you create a new access token, you send the access token and refresh token back to the user. So that's how it works, the rotation and things like that. In that particular endpoint, you can also have IP rate limiting, things like that, so that it's more and more secure. Hope that works. I mean, you are able to understand what I'm trying to say. So let's just sign in. Okay, let's go back to this homepage. Okay, metadata. So if I go to dashboard, see, even though I'm dashboard, this is create next app, right? Create next app. So if I am in the inspect and I go to head and I go to meta, see this meta. So one is the character set, which is UTF-8. This is by default added by the Next.js, so you don't have to worry about it. But then there's a title, and even though we are on the dashboard, the title is still the same. Then there's a description, which is still the same. Then there's a link icon, which is something that Next.js does. So what Next.js does is, in the app, there's a favicon icon, right? favicon.ico. You replace your own favicon.ico file with this, and that will be available at this point. See this Superbase icon, see this icon, see this Accelerator, Twitch, YouTube, these are favicon. So you replace that, and that's the metadata taken out of here. Second, in the layout file or in the page, you have something like const metadata, which is of metadata from Next, type metadata, and then you have this. So let's change this. Let's call it to do application, to doer. Let's call it that. Now, if I go back, refresh, see, this became to doer. And here in the head, the title became the to doer. But we are in the dashboard. We want dashboard something then to doer. So in the title, you have an object. In the metadata, see, the metadata can be actually done on the server component. Okay, that's one condition for the metadata export, const metadata. For this code snippet, the condition is it should be inside the page or the layout, but both of them can only be server component. Okay, so you can start with the root layout. There you will have a default, and let's that be to doer. But then you have a template, and that template can be template literal, which will be /s followed by to doer, which means that in children pages, which is say dashboard, whatever the metadata title there will be taken by this s, then it will be followed by this, and in the home page it will be to doer. So now here, if I just do this, since there's no s provided or no different metadata provided, it's still to doer. So let's go to dashboard. Let's go to our page, and this, since this page is server component, we can have a metadata of export const metadata of metadata type from Next, which will be a object, which will be a title. Let's call it dashboard, and let's make this as type. Let's refresh. See, this is now dashboard followed by pipe followed by to doer. Make sense? Hopefully it does. What about this description? See, the description of any application should be global, so we don't have to do the description for every page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say to doer is the world's most performant, world's most popular to do web application. Just lie. Okay. Now, if I go back to this head, you'll see that in the description, this is the description. Okay. Hope that is making sense. Now, if let's also do the same for every page. So in the dashboard, we have this. What about in the file, in the ID, let's have metadata type, let's say it's file, dashboard file. We will delete this later, but for now it should be some sort of like a metadata. Then we have the dashboard. What about the login page? Let's say login. Come to this part, say login, metadata. Makes sense. Let's copy this part, go to sign up page like this. Let's call it register. Okay. So seed, we don't have to worry about it. This is my entire thing. So our application should be done. So if I go to home page, this is, let's say this, okay. Something is messing up. I think it's a caching issue again. So let's go to here. This is my thing. Yeah, it will be a caching issue. Okay, let's go to this dashboard. Let's go back. Login, it will be login. Registration, it will be register. Let's go to my home page again. And what I'll do is I'll just cache it out. Okay, this is weird. Yeah, let's rerun this because pretty sure that's not how it actually works. So let's rerun this, make it refresh. Now it is fine, right? So some sort of like a caching issue. So now we have completed our metadata. It's a static metadata. Then there's something called generate metadata. That is for pages like this, where we have the ID, right? So in such pages, you don't do metadata like this because this is static. What you do is you copy the function of fetch data, right? And you do it here only. So this is something that you can see in the next part. So let's go to docs, right? Let's go to metadata. Here you will have dynamic metadata and check what happens. There's a function called generate metadata, right? See this, it's an async function, right? And it takes the params and the search params, and then it does this. Now these things, params, search params, things like that, live stream 4 or live stream 3 tomorrow or maybe afterwards, while we are building the to-do application, we will run into these situations. So we will learn these things there only. Not to mention there's a use search params, use search things like that. We can learn it there only. Or if you want to learn those things outside, what you can do is, I mean, it's the same thing. Therefore, you can go to my YouTube channel. In my YouTube channel, oh god, Prime is actually streaming, so I will be going there as well. But you can go to videos. See, I had the entire section, right? The Next.js 14. There, it's the last thing. Yeah, use search params, things like that. So if you just want to understand what those things are, you can just go and watch this series, which is in the playlist of this Next.js course itself. There's a playlist, you can just watch that. This is Next.js 13, so things have changed. Obviously Next.js 13, 14, things have changed in Next.js 15, but most of the things in terms of depth is available here. It says crash course, it's not, it's just that I just went too deep. Okay, there are still 2 things left which I am not able to edit. We'll see if it's required or not. All right, hopefully you can go there and look for it. There is an entire metadata which is available, video, which maybe I'll just edit those videos tomorrow and release those, which will finish this particular series at least. Okay. But I hope you understand the metadata part of it, right? So we will look into it while in live stream 4 onwards. Okay. So this completes our crash course. So we covered pretty much everything from installation to routing to styling to layouts, pages, links, setting up our database, authentication, authorization in a very mimicked way. But in principle, you understand what it is: data fetching, data access layer, data fetching, static and dynamic rendering, streaming of the data. In principle, it is available. Error handling with a not found page, custom not found page, A1Y, the tools that you require, and metadata. Hopefully this tutorial of crash course is enough. Tomorrow, if time permits, what I'm going to focus on is deep diving into the authentication authorization, and we will implement the entire security. Like, we will implement two things. One is email password login. Then we will implement the email magic link. Everything here only, right? So hope you complete till this point, and I will update the GitHub code once we do the authentication and authorization part tomorrow, so that there's no problem here. Hope that makes sense. So for now, I'll just delete this. And as a matter of fact, if you go to this Next.js thing, it's not updated, right? It says this. See, it's not updated. Nothing will happen. You can just try, right? The reason why it's not updated is because I don't want this to be bombarded, because I did have leaked the password. And once tomorrow this is set up, we will do a proper mechanism. So it will be users, it will be to-do list, things like that. The modification will also happen here because it requires refresh tokens, things like that. Okay, cool. So now I will be going back and watching. I think Prime is here. So I'll just watch this because, oh, cool. He didn't make it member only. Cool. That makes sense. So I'll just watch it now. Hopefully we are good to go. So take care. Okay. So take care and see you tomorrow.